Hello everyone and welcome to episode 8 of Listen Up, brought to you from Abbeycare Recovery. My name's Eddie Clark and this week we're welcoming along John Elford. Welcome to the show, John.
Hi Eddie, well, I'm glad to be here.
So John is the company director of Get Into Recovery CIC and he's the owner of Somerton Lodge Sober Hotel in the Isle of Wight. John's also a very successful author of several recovery self-help books with a 12-step focus, and he has also designed the Integrated Step course, which is a 12-step focus inpatient rehab program. Did I get all that right there, John?
Yeah, well, fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you, John, for being on the show. You came up for Abbeycare's recovery gathering yesterday. You were a special guest where Paul brought you up.
Mm-hmm.
How did you find yesterday's gathering? Did you enjoy it?
I think it was probably the best of those things that I've been to. I really loved the way that everyone respected each other, the way that it was very inclusive. There was just absolute joy. It was a wonderful event. I just felt really, really comfortable.
And I know you're not just saying that because you're on the show, because I actually did ask you before the show what you felt about that, you know. And no, and I have to agree, you know, it's probably the 9th Abbeycare gathering I've been to in my time while working there. And certainly yesterday when they speak about there's a power in the room, there's a connection and stuff, a lot of that was very active yesterday. So I'm glad you came along and glad you enjoyed it. Thank you. How are you finding Glasgow, Scotland? How are you finding things?
Well, as you know, I've come up from the Isle of Wight. So we're used to glorious sunshine, weather that's at least 5 degrees warmer, at least. But yeah, what a privilege to come up here and work with yourselves and the team at Abbeycare and all of those people. And look forward to sharing ideas and moving forward. You know, it's really, really nice to come up here and feel so welcome.
No, thank you for coming up, John. I mean, we'll speak a wee bit further on in the podcast today around about some of your work and how that would look perhaps at places like Abbeycare, residential rehabs and stuff. So a long list of roles that you've got, projects you're involved in, a career with a lot of recovery focused, kind of 12-step focused. So how did your working career begin?
What, in my life or in recovery?
Where did it all begin, your working career?
So, okay. So, as a 17-year-old lad, I joined the Air Force as a medic. So I always wanted to work in some sort of medical role. When I say a medic, the word has been hijacked, but we were all called medics. Technically now you might call it a medical assistant.
Okay.
So I wasn't a doctor, just making that clear, spent a fair few years in the Air Force as a medical assistant, working predominantly in Germany. Left the Air Force, started studying nursing, and then went on a career of active alcoholism. Managed to throw all of that training and professionality away. My career went down and down and down and down. And like I said just now, my last job that I was sacked from was in a tomato factory. And I worked in a tomato factory. I was on a production line and we had to put 6 tomatoes in a punnet. And I couldn't do it. I would put 5 in, I would put 7 in, I would put green ones in. And that was my last. They had to get rid of me. I couldn't do the job. Alcohol had damaged me that much that I was no longer functional to be employed.
So John, just for our kind of viewers and listeners, how quick was that decline? What was your story? When did your drinking begin, and where did it end up?
Um, I think, like in the UK, I think I was your sort of normal teenager that around 15, everyone was drinking Isle of Wight scrumpy cider and all of that sort of thing. It was just sort of fairly normal for us teenagers to drink beer and cider and do daft stuff. Joining the Air Force, a lot of people understand that military culture. We were expected to drink. If we, there was beer calls and happy hours at least once a week, and if you didn't go, you were frowned upon. Something that we hadn't talked about during that time, I did a lot of work in Europe as the result of I worked in a hospital in Europe, and we were the receiving centre for any terrorism acts of violence in Europe. And that was incredibly traumatic. And we used to get drunk after having really, really terrible days. So, and that just became the norm. Yeah. And that was pretty tough times.
Yeah.
And alcoholism just started to get worse and worse, really, from my early 20s until I stopped drinking at the age of 35. But by the time I had got to 35, I was homeless. I wasn't allowed to pick up my kids from school. Lots of sofa surfing. At one time, I lived in the woods. And if anyone's ever been homeless living in the woods, that's horrendous. That's horrible. You'd wake up every morning, you've been eaten and bitten by every damned insect in those woods, and you were cold and hungry, and that was really miserable and hard. At the end of my drinking, I weighed about 8 or 9 stone. I had really bad peripheral neuropathy. For anyone that doesn't know what that is, my nerve endings in my hands and feet had stopped working. I couldn't really walk properly. I couldn't hold a drink. My hands would shake and all of that sort of thing. So I was really, really bent out of shape physically and mentally. It was, pretty close to dying.
Yeah. If I just take you back a wee bit there, John, you spoke there about working at that hospital in Europe and stuff. How much do you believe that trauma you described that as? How much do you believe that did affect you? Did you know that at the time? Was there support there at the time for you to speak about that? What did that look like?
The reason I'm laughing, I think I mentioned what the support was. The support was happy hour in the bar.
Okay.
There was no support for that stuff. And yes, it was incredibly traumatic. I will discuss that further in a sec,
Okay.
but one of the things that happened when we left Germany and I came back to the Isle of Wight as a civilian, I'd left the Air Force, I came back to the Isle of Wight. It took me 6 months to get out of the habit of checking my car for terrorists. So we lived in this constant fear, and we were taught in Germany, when you walk up to your car, you start to scan the area around to see if anyone's watching you. And then we would go down on our hands and feet, and we would check the wheel arches for bombs that may have been balanced on the wheel arches. And then you'd have a mirror, you'd scan underneath the car for bombs that might have been stuck to the bottom of your car. And we lived life like that every day for years. And they put bomb blast curtains on our bedroom windows and things like that. So there was all this constant fear. And we just thought it was normal. We just thought it was normal. And there's often talks around trauma and addiction. What I do know is that my alcoholism held on to all that pain
Yeah.
and magnified it and used it to empower my opinions of the world, my opinions of myself. It empowered my addiction, all of that sort of, if you had my life, you drink too type of stuff. And what I found out in recovery was actually there was really good things in my life that had happened, and beautiful things and wonderful things. But the alcoholism just focused on the negativity. So the trauma was really powerful, but in recovery, I've learned that actually that wasn't the cause of my addiction. It was part of it. So yeah, and those things became right-sized just by finding recovery for me. So yeah.
Thanks, John. So you spoke there, and you says you found recovery at 36 years old. What got you into recovery? What did that look like for you?
So I had about 2 years from about 33 to 35 that I can't actually remember. Can't remember much of them. He's given away my age. So 2002, I can't remember the whole year of 2002. Yeah, and I got into recovery in 2003. I had in the previous years, sort of 2001, 2002, in and out of hospital, detoxes. Apparently I was in a coma for 2 weeks at one time. So people tell me, I can't actually remember. I was really, really close to death. I had woken up in casualty at one time, and some of the staff that I'd done my nurse training were sort of looking down at me. And I had ECG leads across my chest, and I was lucky to make it. None of that stuff made me want to change my drinking. There's a bit of a joke amongst people that have been in that same casualty at that hospital, that there's a little local off license, and many of us, when we were discharged from hospital for various alcohol related injuries, would go across that off license. The first thing that we would do is nip over there and get half a bottle of vodka or something. And that was the madness, the disease of addiction. It was incredibly powerful. And all of that pain did not help me change or see it. I'd been into rehab, and it was a great rehab, but I came out and I drank again. And yeah, it was hard. And the thing that we talked about, so I had been living in the woods for a little while. For some reason, I don't know how I got there, but I came to consciousness in my mum and dad's spare bedroom. And I was in a right mess, as you can imagine. Yeah, I was in a right mess. And I got out of bed, shaking and rattling, and I walked down the stairs, and I put my hand on the front door handle. And like I say, every time I say this to anyone, I can just see it in my mind. I can feel it. My mum had been going to Al-Anon, which is the family's branch of AA. And as I put my hand on the door handle, she said to me, "Where are you going?" I said, "I'm going to the shop," which we all know was code for I'm going to go out and buy some booze. And my mum said to me, "It's your choice." I had never heard that ever in my life. Hundreds of people may have told me, loads of people may have tried to have taught me all sorts of things. But when my mum said to me, "It's your choice," like the dramatic things that happen in films when there's a big clap of thunder or that sort, I held on to that door handle, and for the first time ever, I knew it was my choice. I have no idea why that happened. It happened then. And so I went back upstairs. I didn't go to the shop. I went back upstairs. And white knuckled it. It was crazy hard. I did not want to go down to the doctors and get some Librium and do another soft controlled detox. Something inside me said, I need to feel every damn second of this.
Mm.
And I did. And I had a crazy spiritual experience whilst in that bedroom. And I don't know, that part of me says, do you know what, this could have been withdrawal hallucinations, or it could have been a genuine spiritual experience. Yeah. I have no idea. But I was lying in that bed and I woke up, and anyone that's been through that, you wake up and you're sweaty and you're horrible and it's miserable and you're hurt. And in the corner of my mum's bedroom, there was a figure stood there, and it was this black silhouette figure that was about 7 foot tall, and it sort of hunched over because the room wasn't quite big enough for it. And in front of the bed, there was a wall, a white wall at the end of the bedroom, and this white wall slowly changed into a yellow poppy field that went up and up and up and up into the clouds. And I'm sat there looking at it, lying in bed looking at it. And this voice said to me from this big dark figure, either choose to live or die. And I said, I choose to live. And the black figure said, then live. And it all disappeared. The wall changed back to white and the figure disappeared. And honestly, Eddie, as I am sat here, I am utterly, utterly convinced that if I said I want to die, the tall figure would have taken my hand and I would have walked up through that poppy field and I would have moved on. Yeah.
How does somebody compute that when you're lying there coming out the end of an alcohol withdrawal? You've experienced that. What did that do for you, John? What did that kind of tell you?
I absolutely knew at that second that I would never pick up a drink again.
Wow.
100%. Yeah. I knew that the whole world had changed and my relationship with it. I knew for the first time that I was an alcoholic. I knew all of that stuff that people have been trying to tell me for years, and I never knew it before. I never knew it before that moment, ever. What I then realised is that recovery is a process. I didn't know how to live in the world sober because I hadn't done it for so long.
Yeah.
And there was lots of stuff to learn. I remember the first time in recovery cooking a roast dinner. How absolutely, utterly, and people that aren't alcoholic won't understand this, but trying to do tasks like that sober that I'd done multiple times before, I'd have 3 or 4 glasses of wine whilst peeling the potatoes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So trying to cook a roast dinner sober was incredibly anxiety driving. Yeah. People might think that's daft that have never been through addiction. So what I realized is that to survive in recovery, I had to be able to learn to do this stuff without succumbing to anxiety and fear and all of those triggery things that made me want to pick up a drink again. And that was a process, a whole process of rebalancing my life and re-engaging and learning how to be quiet and still in my own head, learning to interact with human beings without fear, learning how to walk through the local Tesco's and not be terrified of the booze aisle. All of that stuff, I knew that there was a whole process of stuff I had to go through. And for me, that was pretty much 12-step stuff.
Okay.
Drug and alcohol addiction services on the Isle of Wight. In fact, in the whole country. At that time, around the beginnings of the 2000s, there was only help for drug addiction. There wasn't help for alcohol.
Okay.
And so local services, you would go in there and say, I've got an alcohol problem. And they would say, well, can you make up that you've got a drug problem so we can put you on our books?
Okay.
So there was no help. The only thing was a few local 12-step meetings that I engaged with. And that was the beginning of recovery.
Wow. Amazing journey, John. Amazing how you got in there. So how long was it into your recovery when you wrote your first book, the Sponsor's 12-Step Manual?
Do you know why? It's my timeline memory is really hard, over the last, so I've been in recovery now 22 years.
Brilliant.
And, when someone says, when did this happen and when did that happen? I go, do you know what? I don't actually know. I know. So it took about 10 years to get from, those early days to self-publishing the Sponsor 12-Step Manual.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
And where did that idea come from? How did that come about?
I was extremely lucky in my early recovery. I got employed by a local training provider. I actually wrote a spec letter to them and said, at the time I was living in a hostel for homeless alcoholics and addicts. My recovery was really great. I had gone to college to study learning, and I was studying counselling skills. And I wrote to this training provider that helped young adults with drug and alcohol problems to try and get into employment and things. And I just wrote this spec letter and said, maybe my experience of being a hopeless drunk could be of use to your services. And the chief exec gave me a chance.
Wow.
She said, come in for an interview. And I went into an interview, and I ended up working and supporting these young people at the beginnings of their careers and education and things that had drug and alcohol problems. She sent me to university to study teaching, which was incredible. I like my last job I was sacked from because I couldn't count tomatoes. And then I was in university in recovery studying teaching at degree level. It's like, what the hell happened there? Yeah. Whilst I was teaching, whilst I was learning in university about all these teaching methodologies, I learned about something called Bloom's Taxonomy. And Bloom's Taxonomy is the educational theory behind really most of my work.
Okay.
And it's about a way of learning, structured ways of learning. And I saw people dying of addiction around me, and it just drove me nuts. I wanted to help them more.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw people that had incredible amounts of intelligence. They could remember parts of recovery literature, off the tops of their head. They were fantastically clever people, and they still died of alcoholism.
Mm.
And that drove me nuts. Internally, I saw these educational theories and I thought, I didn't think I could teach people better, but I just thought these theories could help some people not die of the disease of addiction.
Yeah. And
so I just started putting together these ideas to write books, and I had this higher power occasion where I won a website and I didn't know what to put on the website. And someone said, why don't you put your crappy ideas for teaching addiction on the website? Okay. And that was the beginning. That was how, the books all started to come from there. After the website was launched, within a couple of months, I was contacted by some really heavy hitter addiction professionals in America.
Okay.
That said, John, we love your methodology. We love the way you're trying to teach 12 steps and addiction and that sort of thing. And they invited me over to America for a couple of months to study and learn with them. And they wanted to study and learn from me. And that was an incredible adventure that started me writing all sorts of things.
And what did that look like over in America when they say come over and study with us? We'll study with yourself. what does that look like? Just a kind of partnership of working on ideas, or is it your own ideas? How does that look?
So first of all, the guy that invited me out, a guy called Chris Fajardo, who passed away recently, but a wonderful, wonderful guy. Chris Fajardo was the originator of something in America called the healing place model. The healing place model was an incredible recovery model that helped fish people out from under bridges and things like that, hopeless addicts. And they went through the healing place model and they became, people in recovery doing all sorts of great recovery stuff. So part of that was connecting with Chris and learning about the healing place model. The first big meeting they took me to at one of these places called the healing place, there was a big sign outside the door that said, "Please leave your guns and knives in the bin here before you go into the meeting." And it was pretty scary, especially as I'm an Isle of Wight boy, and it was like, whoa, this is the real big world. Mm-hmm. And that was incredible. I went in there and Chris was a tiny little guy, but all of these people in this, there was about 150 people in there. They all knew that he was a pivotal figure in their recoveries, and it was incredible. I also met Tim and Nina Mosley out there. Tim and Nina ran Hotel Louisville, and Hotel Louisville was this huge hotel, a 4-story hotel. No, it might have even been bigger than that. But I remember that there was 4 stories, and Tim and Nina's hotel, the bottom floor was a rehab. And so they worked with Chris and they used parts of his model. They would rescue people from under bridges. People would go there that were hopeless addicts, and Tim and Nina and their team would detox people and put them through, a program and save their lives. Those people were then moved to the second floor, and on the second floor, they did rehab. They also, on that second floor, they moved it, once they'd done their rehab for, I think it was about 6 months, they moved into a different part of the hotel, and then they were trained to be hotel staff. So the top 2 floors of that building was a real hotel.
Wow.
And all of the staff were people in very early recovery, trying to find a career, trying to find stabilization. They're all supported by Tim and Nina and their team. And, people stayed there a couple of years and they got qualified, and there was people doing chefing qualifications. There was people doing housekeeping, hotel administration, all sorts of things. And it was incredible to see. And they had other branches around here and there where they were doing specialist work, helping addicts all over the place, which was the idea that spurred me on to getting Somerton Lodge on the Isle of Wight.
And we're going to speak about that in a wee while, but I just think that is such an amazing idea, isn't it? And project, and the real kind of journey of one person who arrives there broken with addiction, and the self-development as well as the recovery aspect of it, so that when you're coming out the other side of that, then you're somebody who's not only a person in recovery, but you're qualified, you're skilled, you're able, you're capable. And that's what we really look to do with people, isn't it? Just getting people along and getting in and getting sober, getting clean. It's not enough. Not enough. There needs to be more at the other side of that, for people. I just think it's an absolutely outstanding idea. So you also developed integrated step course. Could you tell us a wee bit about that and what that looks like? And
so the integrated step course is a really comprehensive 6-month rehab program.
Okay.
And again, my focus is 12-step. Doesn't whether you like 12-step or not,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. But that's the focus of all of the educational stuff that I've written. So the integrated step course was an in-depth, comprehensive rehab program with lesson plans, with PowerPoints, with group work, with homework.
Mm-hmm.
It also included psychosocial sessions. It was CBT based and motivational interviewing based. A couple of really huge manuals that a few rehabs in the UK back then started to use. It became the foundations of their success. And it was a really good thing. Lots of that went wrong when some of the major companies in the UK, I'm sure people remember one of the huge drug and alcohol treatment providers called Lifeline. Lifeline used a lot of my work and then they went bust.
Okay.
So a lot of that failed. There were a few places in the UK that are still using it. There were a couple of places in America, and I've got connections in Ghana, in Africa, and they use elements of that out there. There's a smaller program, the Integrated Step Course RI, which is reduced intensity, which the program had really good success in HMP Durham.
Yeah.
They loved it. They had a whole recovery wing, which sadly doesn't exist anymore. And that recovery wing was doing superb work, and they used the integrated step course in there all the time. And I've got some great feedback from their governor and people about how it helped that whole wing develop. A smaller program was developed for HMP Northumberland because they wanted to do a small version of it, but they didn't have the staff and the amount of time to deliver, quite an intensive big program.
Yeah.
But that program was based on all of this methodology that I'd learned when I was studying teaching. So that's all based around this hierarchy of learning and various other elements in there. Yeah.
That's amazing. And it's quite sad there when you're speaking about HMP Durham and they're having the kind of recovery wing, if you like, or recovery focused kind of wing in there. Then financially, again, due to finances, that gets pulled, and how that's going to affect so many people's kind of experience or opportunity to go out there. I remember doing a talk for Abbeycare up at Inverness prison. It was, and they've got a recovery cafe in there, and they've got a wee kind of recovery vibe. It's the only prison I've been to where it had a recovery wing as well, so there's only like 6 cells, and it's separate for the rest of the prison. And they guys and they welcomed us in to walk around, and it's a really healthy environment within a really unhealthy environment of prison. And we're seeing more and more now, aren't we? The prison to rehab scheme, where prisoners are getting the option to leave, finish their sentence and come into rehab now, And like you're kind enough to show me through your books and your workbooks and stuff over the last couple of days while you've been up. And a lot of it looks quite similar to the format that the Narcotics Anonymous Step Working Guide is in. And that was designed initially to be able to deliver in prisons as well and stuff. It's user friendly, isn't it? It's what I really like about it. But it's amazing the work you've done, and there was more books and you released through that as well. Would that be right, John? There was more. What other books was there? Or what's your latest book that you've released?
The latest book is called A Deep Dive into the 12 Steps. And the deep dive is really an in-depth, comprehensive 12-step study, studying the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the 12 and 12, the 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And that is for I was going to say 12-step nutters. That's for people that really, really love that 12-step approach, because that's a very in-depth book. And I actually really like it. And it's only been released maybe 1 or 2 months. There's already a group setting up in North Carolina in America that are going to use it as the focal point of their study.
Amazing.
So again, really lucky in that the stuff that I write and develop, people like, and they use it.
Yeah. And just on that note, would it be right in saying that, let me get this right, you're in the highest 1% of self-publishers?
Absolutely.
Is that correct? How does somebody get in the highest 1% of self-publishing?
Luck. Yeah, I mean, to me, that's incredible. Writing books, and the first book, the Sponsor's 12-Step Manual, and there's a workbook edition. I honestly never ever thought that I wanted to be an author.
Okay.
But people around me, when they saw this methodology, this way that I was trying to teach 12-step stuff and that sort of thing, they sort of persuaded me to publish and write the books. And I didn't want to. I thought people had criticise me and hassle me and take the piss and all of that sort of stuff. But that one guy that said to me, John, if it saves one life, it's worth doing. So I self-published the Sponsor's 12-Step Manual, and I didn't expect it really to sell any at all. Publish book, blah, 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 blah. And it started to sell a few, and then a few more. And that was published originally in 2014, I think, properly. And it wasn't long before at that time it was selling 5 or 10 a day. And I started to realise, this is doing pretty damn well. And it was only recently that I did some proper research on what are the success stories of self-published books. And I found out that on average, self-published authors sell about 250 books in its lifetime.
Okay.
Yeah. I sell still about 250 a month. And I've never done any marketing or self-promotion. No, I lie. Once I spent 10 quid on a Facebook advert, and I had no idea what it did anyway. So yeah, I did some research, and now the sponsor manual and the workbook edition have sold over 29,000 books.
Wow, amazing! Well done.
And if you research self-published authors and put in how many, I've sold 29,000 books, then it comes out and says you're in the top 1% of self-published authors in the world. And I never expected that. No idea that would happen. Yeah. And so, I've written a few other books, mainly because I enjoy writing books, but never with that idea that I'm an author and I want people to read my stuff. That you get that internal thing where you think, I just got to get this out.
Yeah.
If people read it, that's their stuff, but I've got to write it. But never had any grandiose ideas of being a recognised author at all. So yeah, really grateful.
Amazing achievement, though. Okay, so you spoke a wee bit earlier about your friends over in America with their hotel, which was detox rehab, and running hotel as well. So you've now took some of that idea, haven't you, for your own venture back in Isle of Wight for Somerton Lodge. Can you tell us a wee bit how that? Well, we know a wee bit about how it came about, but how did that actually practically come about for yourself?
Well, I was lucky enough in recovery to get stabilised, get a job, get employed, and then I'd gone over to see the place in Kentucky, the big hotel, and this idea in my head that I'd really love to do this for people, create an environment where we can help people get well and we can train them and help them back into employment and that sort of thing. So we bought Somerton Lodge 6 years ago. And the idea was that it was going to be a recovery hotel and we were going to do lots of recovery work in it.
Okay.
As we know, 2020, COVID came along and we had sort of barely owned the hotel when we got shut down. And that really lasted for about 2 years, the whole holiday industry, particularly on the Isle of Wight. About 2 years was non-existent. So we had to open the hotel to booking.com and Expedia and those online things purely to survive. But we have been a booze-free hotel up until now. No, we're still a booze-free hotel. And it's been nice. It's been good. We get people that don't know our connection with recovery, but they want to come along to a hotel where people aren't drinking because they want quietness and peace and that sort of thing. So we get a fair few people turn up at the hotel just because they know that we're alcohol free, and there's not going to be people drunk at 1 o'clock in the morning trying to get in the wrong room or thumping their way down the corridor and that sort of thing. So yeah, it's been a nice journey, but we have been dependent on the big online travel agencies supporting us in that. But it's not what we want to do anymore, as you know. Yeah.
So what is the plans going forward then for Somerton?
So luckily, we've teamed up with a great group of people, some detox experts who are called Equilibrium Project, and that's owned and run by two wonderful people called Charlie and Vicky. We're going to be working with Charlie and Vicky to turn the hotel back into what we wanted to create in the first place. So we want to go back to those ideas that I got in Kentucky. We're going to be working with Charlie and Vicky to help people detox, and then they can stay at the hotel as a retreat and perhaps do other work in that sort of peer support environment. It's not a rehab, I must emphasize that. Yeah. And we have been over the last few years, it's been really good because we have been able to employ people in their first jobs in recovery and train them and help them get some qualifications and help them step back into the world of employment, and giving them their first chance of employment in recovery when their work history might be as mottled as mine was.
When they can't count tomatoes.
Yeah. So we've helped a few people through and get them into things. But now this opportunity is starting, in only 2 or 3 weeks' time in October.
Amazing.
We want to start training people in all sorts of aspects of hospitality and that sort of thing, and take a step back towards that really supportive model. We're running workshops, we're running groups, we're doing all sorts of things that we originally wanted to do with the hotel. So yeah, it's heading in the right direction for us now.
That's brilliant, John. I just think it's an absolutely amazing idea, as I've probably told you over and over since you told me originally, and wish you well for that in the future, and I'm sure it will be a success. Okay, so prior to the show, I asked you to name 3 significant songs in your life.
Yeah.
Not particularly your 3 favourite songs, but 3 significant songs. And I asked you to have a wee think about the reason why they're significant.
Yeah.
So the first one you've got is Fatboy Slim, DJ Mix.
Yeah.
Why have you chosen that one?
I always loved that style of music. For some reason, it just gets right into my soul and makes me feel energized. I do love all sorts of music, but I don't know what it is about that Fatboy Slim DJ mix. It's about an hour and a quarter long. And what I do know is I can stick my poddies in and I can go up the gym and I can put some Fatboy Slim on, and just get on with it. And I love it. And that's always been a significant, Fatboy Slim fan. Love it. Yeah.
Brilliant. And the second song you chose was The Future Sounds of London in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
Why have you chosen this?
The Future Sounds of London music was very significant in my early recovery. I found it very meditative. I found that it was music that I could connect to and with, that allowed me to get into a quiet state of mind so that I could relax. And the whole Future Sounds of London, their style of music really did that for me. Yeah. But that one particular track, especially the oil funk dub mix, it just really gets inside me. And it takes me away from the real world. And I can connect with that music and forget about everything else.
Brilliant. And finally, you've chosen Chicane and An Ocean Apart.
Yeah, and partly chosen Chicane. I love Chicane music, but I particularly like that track because the music video for it was filmed in Somerton Lodge, and I'm in it.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have a great relationship with Chicane. He's a really good friend of mine. People know that from his podcasts that he's in recovery. And Chicane is now the patron of Get Into Recovery, my community interest company. And so we work together to talk and discuss lots of things. So this idea of the hotel that we're developing now in October, Nick Chicane is really involved in. So he's part of the team now building that. But I love his music. And I love that track in particular because I'm in it.
Amazing. John Elford, thank you for coming on Listen Up podcast today. It's been lovely to meet you over the last couple of days, John, and to look at some of your work that you've made, and thank you for leaving a few of your books as gifts for us at the clinic. And I wish you well for Somerton Lodge, and I'm sure it'll be a huge success. So thanks for coming on the show today. Thank you.
Yeah. Don't forget, in a year's time, that we want to have a really nice sober fest on the Isle of Wight.
Yeah,
we look forward to seeing you there, Eddie.
Okay, thanks, John.
Thank you.